The last few months have been incredibly difficult. My wife, Catherine, was having an affair with a colleague, and it seemed like everyone knew about it, but no one had the courage to say anything. I was just as guilty as the others. For some strange reason, I hoped it would all just end, and things would go back to normal. Of course, that was a fantasy because you can't return to what once was. We had been married for 19 years and had 3 children. Rob, the eldest, was 18. Catherine was pregnant when we got married. A year later, Donna was born, and the following year Darcy came along, after which I had a vasectomy. They were good kids, and up until recently, we hadn't had any problems with them. Needless to say, the issue with the children stemmed from their mother's reckless behavior. For the past 3 years, Catherine had been working in the claims department of a large insurance company. When she started working overtime, several evenings a week, the kids and I noticed it right away. She got a new hairstyle and started going to the gym. Her lingerie drawer became noticeably sexier, but I never got to enjoy any of it. Donna and Darcy saw her having lunch with her department manager at an upscale restaurant, but she never mentioned it to me. In desperation, I decided to follow her like a lovesick puppy. Her trips to motels with her lover were frequent and blatant. Although I didn't see the need, I still documented the times and dates of several of their meetings. As the affair dragged on, the family began to fall apart. All of this happened without any meaningful conversations. The kids were angry at their mother for her deceit. They were angry at me for not confronting her and instead trying to keep my composure. I was too foolish to realize that waiting was hopeless. The only time the family came together was at dinner, and even then, it was a painful ordeal. Conversations were practically non-existent, and as soon as each child finished eating, they quietly disappeared, usually leaving the house until bedtime. John, I'm not going to put up with this kind of attitude from the kids for much longer. If you don't do something to fix it, I will. I'll take care of it. You've been saying that for a whole month. I don't know what's gotten into them. Why have they suddenly started acting like little kids? Oh, that's not the problem. The problem was figuring out how to handle it. I think now we have a solution. Are you going to clue me in, or is this some big dark secret? No secret. Tomorrow, I'm moving in with my parents. Catherine was far from pleased with the news. She stopped clearing the table and sat back down with a heavy, decisive thought. What the hell are you talking about, John? You can't commute to work from Frackville, and I can't manage this place and the kids on my own. How is this supposed to fix anything? Actually, Catherine, you won't have to worry about the kids. They're coming with me. I hadn't expected to see furrowed brows and a tight lower lip, but in hindsight, it wasn't all that surprising. Resting her elbows on the table, my loving wife leaned forward and stared me straight in the eyes. There's no way in hell you're leaving this house with my children. What makes you think you can get away with such nonsense? That's what we've decided. Catherine let out an irritated sigh, stood up, and resumed clearing the table. She muttered something under her breath, but I couldn't make out the words. After tossing the last piece of china into the sink, she turned around. Why? Why is this happening? I think it's because they're tired of the embarrassment. What the hell are you talking about? It's mostly about your affair with Brian Masterson. You've flaunted your infidelity so much that the entire family knows about it. You've shown no respect for your children or for me. What? Are you going to deny it? Are you going to tell me you're not spending several days a week having intimate moments in various motels? Are you going to say I don't know what's going on? I decided I didn't want to continue this conversation any further. There were plenty of things I could have thrown in her face, but I didn't have the courage. I pushed my chair back and left the room. Catherine stood by the sink, her hand resting on her hip. I noticed a defiant expression on her face, almost as if she was pleased I had finally brought up her infidelity. It felt like she had been taunting me all along, looking for a reason to shed the burden of guilt she'd been carrying. I expected a lecture I had no intention of sitting through tonight. I had absolutely no desire to hear how I had driven her to seek comfort elsewhere because I was an average husband and a lousy lover. Sure, I could accuse her of being unfaithful, but in the end, I'd still somehow end up being the one to blame. I knew Catherine well enough to understand she had already planned everything she was going to say. My best move was not to play the game at all. "And what about your job?" "I'm leaving." I heard her shout my name as I stepped out the door, unaware of where the kids were at that moment. All their clothes and personal belongings had been packed into Rob's Subaru Outback. The car had over 100,000 miles on it, but I estimated it still had another 100,000 left. My own clothes and important documents were stacked in the back seat of the Jeep. When Catherine returned home, she hadn't noticed any of this. We all agreed that anything we couldn't take on the first trip, we would come back for later. I was certain Catherine would inspect the house thoroughly after I left. At that point, there was no turning back. I decided I needed to call Donna. Donna always kept a level head. Rob might have been the eldest and the only son, but he had no problem letting Donna take charge. "Donna, it's Dad. Are you still at home?" "No. I'm on my way to a motel. I think it would be better if you and the others found a place to stay for the night. Can you get in touch with Rob?" "No problem. Darcy and I will stay with Betsy Cooper. I'm not sure what Rob's plans are, but I think I can reach him." "All right. Let's meet tomorrow at 6 in the morning at the Waffle House on Lancaster Pike. From there, we'll head to Freckville." Dad, was Mom angry? "I think so. I'll tell you about it tomorrow. Oh, and after you call Rob, it might be best to turn off your phone." After checking into the Disco Motel, I turned off my own phone. I had just finished taking a shower when there was a knock at the door. Expecting to find an enraged Catherine, I opened it, but instead, I saw Rob standing there with a big grin on his face. Motels weren't exactly plentiful in town, so by 7 o'clock the next morning, we were already on our way to the coal regions. Catherine and I still hadn't bothered to discuss my job situation. It didn't matter because at that point, I was unemployed. The most practical thing to do in such circumstances was to quietly stash away as much cash as possible. If I filed for divorce, I'd have to go through the process of declaring assets and coming up with a fair division. I decided to say to hell with all of that. Nobody likes it when their credit takes a nosedive. But under the circumstances, it seemed like a good idea. If I wasn't working, the kids could qualify for various grants and benefits when it came time for college. I wanted to make sure they got everything they needed, though that might not happen. Living with my parents would also cover many of the usual expenses. I was almost certain Catherine wouldn't wait long before filing for divorce. I would probably agree to anything she demanded, just to be rid of this marriage. There wasn't much she could get, though, since I didn't have a job, and the kids wouldn't go with her even if they were ordered to. All I could do now was sit and wait. It felt good to return to my hometown. The last time I lived there was before I left for college. After graduation, the closest place I could find even half-decent work was in Reading. Catherine, originally from Baltimore, didn't mind being just a few hours' drive from her family. We got married during my final semester at the University of Pennsylvania. Catherine never finished her degree because of her pregnancy. She had never shown much interest in studying. I think she came here to get away from her parents and find a husband. One way or another, I had thought I'd won the marriage lottery. My prize from the marriage was 3 wonderful kids and a wife who turned out to be a shrew. Of course, I had regrets, but I'm not the type to dwell on the past. I didn't know my past would catch up with me so quickly. Since I had plenty of old friends in the area, getting some under-the-table work wasn't too hard. I stashed away as much money as I could to keep it out of Catherine's reach. She couldn't touch any of it unless she started the divorce process. All 3 kids left with me as well. Under the circumstances, I think they felt obligated to come along. I didn't leave Catherine because the kids wanted me to, but it seemed like they felt the same way. Mom and Dad reluctantly accepted money from us, though I don't think they really needed it. They just didn't want me to feel like a freeloader. Catherine called 2 weeks later and asked if I planned to pay the mortgage. I told her no. 2 weeks after that, she called again, this time saying her car insurance needed renewal. I gave her the same answer. Catherine then attempted to bring up the topic of her affair. She tried to sound apologetic and sincere, but it didn't work. I patiently listened as she explained how her friendship with Masterson developed into a full-blown relationship. She assured me it was purely physical and nothing more. After a few minutes, she realized how ridiculous it all sounded and stopped mid-sentence. "I'm so sorry, John. I don't have a good excuse for what I did. I truly regret it." After that, she stopped calling. It seems my wife finally realized that our marriage couldn't be saved and filed for divorce. She would have to cover the mortgage, car payments, and all the utilities herself. Technically, I was obligated to help pay for these things, but I felt that if thousands of other beaten-down fathers managed to avoid such responsibilities, I could too. It was worth the risk. I signed the papers and the power of attorney for the sale of the house as soon as I received them. Now it was just a matter of time. Catherine didn't ask for anything besides the house. After covering the closing costs and commissions, she wouldn't get much from it. Rob was gathering all his paperwork for college. Unfortunately, Rob also had other pressing issues. My past was coming back to haunt me, and Rob found himself caught in the middle of it. "Dad, I've got a little problem. I take it you think I can help you. A few weeks ago, I met a girl, and I really like her." At least the conversation started on a high note. In high school, Rob had dated a few girls, but he never seemed seriously interested in any of them. It was nice to hear him acknowledge the possibility of a meaningful relationship. I assume this isn't about pollination techniques. No, but I got an unexpected blow. I met her mother for the first time, and as soon as I introduced myself, she got upset. After I left, she told Shannon she didn't want to see me again. She's never done that with any of Shannon's previous boyfriends. Her mother didn't give her any explanation. I think Shannon's a bit mad at her mom because she eventually agreed to back off, but only if you talk to her. Let me get this straight. This girl's mother will allow you two to date, but only if she talks to me first. That's the gist of it. Shannon said nothing like this has ever happened before. I suppose I can make time. You arrange it and let me know when and where. Rob left the room with a big smile, while I sat there wondering why this woman felt she needed to meet me before giving her approval for their relationship that evening. Rob drove us to Shannon's house. It was an old home located near the main street. The house desperately needed a fresh coat of paint, and the slate walkway was long overdue for leveling. Shannon was waiting by the front door and nervously opened it as we approached. "Hi, I'm Shannon." She was cheerful and sweet. I could see why Rob was so drawn to her. "We really appreciate this, Mr. Ritchell. I'm so sorry to have to invite you over like this, but my mom insisted. I hope you don't mind." "Don't worry about it. I'm sure we can sort everything out quickly." "Mom, Mr. Ritchell is here." My heart skipped a beat as my old high school college sweetheart, Abigail Connor, walked into the room. "Hello, John." "Hello, Abby." The words left my lips automatically. An awkward silence filled the room, quickly broken by Rob. "You two know each other." She kept her eyes fixed on me. "Your father and I went to school together." Shannon seemed pleased with this new revelation. "Well, that should make things easier, right? I've got a fresh pot of coffee ready. I think we'll be more comfortable in the kitchen." I immediately followed her to the back of the house. Once I sat down, she turned to the kids. "You two should wait in the living room for a bit, turn on the TV, and behave yourselves. I'll call you in a few minutes." Abby went to get the coffee, and I let myself drift into memories. It was the fall semester of our final year at the University of Pennsylvania. Abby and I had argued because I didn't want to go home for Thanksgiving. She left without me. While she was away, I partied, got drunk, and ended up arrested for disorderly conduct. My parents were furious, and Abby refused to talk to me when she returned. She was still angry at me when the semester ended, and she went home for Christmas alone. Since my parents were upset with me, I stayed on campus for the holidays. That's when the bad news came. Between Christmas and New Year's, Catherine approached me at the student union. She claimed that during one of my drunken escapades in the dorms, we had slept together, and now she was pregnant. I didn't want to make things worse with my parents. Without much thought, we drove to Gretna Green that same day and got married. I didn't tell my parents until spring after I graduated. Abby found out about the marriage when she returned to school after a few years of studying elsewhere, and she immediately dropped out. I don't know if she ever finished her degree. You're daydreaming. Her words snapped me back to reality as she placed a mug in front of me. She was 20 years older than the last time I'd seen her, but still beautiful. My mind raced, trying to compare her now to my memories. I'm sorry. I wasn't prepared for this. You'll have to give my brain a moment to catch up before I'm of any use. Talking to Abby had always been easy, and I'd always felt comfortable around her. I couldn't even remember what we'd argued about before we broke up. At that moment, I realized I didn't even know her current last name. Rob had never mentioned Shannon's last name, so it was time to break the ice. I tried to stay calm yet open. Is there a Mr. Abby, or is this a discussion just between the two of us? She didn't smile at my pathetic attempt at humor. That's exactly why I invited you here. I'm not looking for anything, but I hope we can avoid any problems. What do you mean by, you're not looking for anything? John, I've never been married. I tried dating a few guys, but nothing worked out. Most of them weren't interested in a single mom. They just wanted easy, no-strings-attached relationships. I still don't understand. Damn it, John. You're Shannon's father. There, I said. I was hoping I could find a more elegant way to tell you, but sometimes things don't go as planned. Of course, I had no idea. Can I get some more coffee? That's it. That's all you've got to say. I think I understand now why you told them they couldn't see each other anymore. Unfortunately, I think it was already too late. By the time I found out that Rob was your son, they had already formed a relationship. Oh my God. You're saying that my son and my daughter are having an inappropriate relationship. I'm absolutely certain. I don't think siblings should love each other physically. The fresh coffee was too hot to drink. I blew on the cup while the mother of my daughter stared at me, waiting for some wise words I didn't have. Abby, I don't think we have a choice, do we? We need to tell them and hope it's not too late. The mood at the table suddenly shifted. I'm so sorry, John. I should have told you, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. You had just gotten married, and I didn't want to ruin your life. So instead, you decided to ruin your own. I have a beautiful, intelligent daughter. I didn't ruin my life. I just had to make a few adjustments. I finished my coffee and leaned back in my chair. By the way, John, not to sound nosy, but where's Catherine? I'm afraid we've grown apart. I always thought that was a nice way to put it, though I never imagined I'd have the chance to use it myself. Oh, sorry for asking. For a few moments, we sat in silence. John, are you going to tell them, or should I? You go ahead, and I'll back you up as best I can. Within a minute, Shannon and Rob were seated with us at the kitchen table. Abby handed Shannon a folded piece of paper. Oh my God. Shannon's exclamation immediately drew Rob's attention, even though she hadn't unfolded the paper yet. What's going on? It's a mysterious birth certificate I wasn't supposed to see until I turned 21. Rob looked puzzled. What the hell is so unusual about a birth certificate? Shannon didn't respond. She unfolded the document and stared at it, her mouth agape. This must be a mistake. Mom, tell me this isn't true. Abby didn't answer. She stared at the floor. Rob tried to peek at the paper, but Shannon kept it out of his reach. Mom, please, tell me it's not true. Still, there was no reply. With a look of disgust, Shannon threw the birth certificate across the table and ran out of the room, sobbing. Dad, What the hell is going on? I'm so sorry, Rob. It was hard for us to tell you, but you needed to know. Know what? Damn it. Shannon is your sister. The kitchen fell silent. In the distance, somewhere in the house, we could hear Shannon crying. Rob slowly got up and left the room. I was sure he had a million questions, but at that moment, he wasn't looking for answers. He had more important matters to handle. Within a few moments, Shannon's sobs began to subside. Abby, do you happen to have any beer? By the time Rob returned, Abby and I were finishing our second beer. Can we go home now, Dad? 2 days later, Rob decided to talk to me again. The house was gloomy, and I felt a sense of relief knowing something might finally be resolved. I want to do a DNA test. I've got the money to pay for it, and I'm not taking no for an answer. Where are we going to do it? There's a lab in Allentown. It's $200 per test. I want to test Shannon, you, and me. Well, if we're going to go to that trouble, we should test the girls too. I'll cover the cost. Do we need to go there, or can they send us a kit by mail? Either works, but I prefer to go there in person. Perfect. You set it up, and we'll make a day of it. I might even stop by Olive Garden for dinner. That same day, I called the Continental Fire and Flood Management Office. I spoke with the head of the company's legal department. He wasn't particularly interested in my family situation, and made that clear right away. However, he was very curious about how Brian Masterson had been paying for the motel rooms he was using. When I mentioned that Masterson was Catherine's boss, and that I needed more information about the company's policies regarding marital infidelity, he quickly ended the conversation. A few days later, Catherine called. For some strange reason, she had lost her job, and was now struggling to pay the bills. She seemed upset when I told her that I hadn't been able to find work and was taking care of my parents. She wanted me to give her enough money so she could move back to Baltimore. She had put the house up for sale, but things weren't going well. She was hoping to leave Pennsylvania before her car got repossessed. She tried once again to explain her relationship with Masterson, but she quickly gave up when I didn't respond. Although she didn't mention it, I knew that Brian Masterson had also been fired. 2 days later, everything changed. I came home to find Rob and Shannon sitting on the couch, smiling like two Cheshire cats. They just sat there with goofy grins on their faces. All right, what's going on? Why the long faces? It was a weak attempt at a joke, but they laughed anyway. Do you want the good news or the not-so-good news? Are you sure you're not mistaken? I don't think so. Well, maybe there's a little bad news, but overall, it's pretty good. Stop messing with me. Donna and Darcy are your daughters. The DNA matched. I take it they're happy about that. They don't know yet. What else? Shannon is your daughter. Another near-perfect match. I'm a little confused. Where's the good part of all this? Don't worry about it right now, but I'm not your son. I didn't see that coming. I loved Rob with all my heart and raised him like any good father would. Now he's telling me I'm not his dad. I need more beer. The smiles vanished from Rob's and Shannon's faces. Everything suddenly became a bit more serious and less carefree. I returned with a fresh bottle of beer and plopped down in my chair. Dad, this doesn't change anything between us. You're my father, no matter what the DNA says. I don't know who the donor was, but he'll always be my dad. I drank half of the new bottle in one go. I don't know whether to be happy or sad. I don't know if this is good news or bad news. I don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do. My new daughter and my former son just sat on the couch, saying nothing. Have you told your mother yet, Shannon? No. Why don't you two run off and break the news to her? I need time to think about all this. Mom and Dad were in the kitchen, trying to stay out of the situation. They had always been very tactful. John, if there's anything we can do, please let us know. We won't offer advice, but we're more than willing to help in any other way. Dad had always been there for me. I wanted to be the same for Rob. Abby found me a few hours later at the Circle Bar. I don't know how she knew I was there, and I don't remember how I got drunk. Looking back, I don't even know why I got drunk. Things weren't all that bad. They were just confusing. It had been 10 years since I'd last overindulged in alcohol, and I didn't have a good excuse for it this time. I woke up on Abby's couch. Somehow, she had gotten me there. I was still fully dressed, but my shoes were off. I could smell fresh coffee, but the bathroom was more important. She was waiting at the kitchen table when I came back from the bathroom. Bathrooms in these old houses were always on the second floor, so I had to tackle the staircase to use it. I won that battle, though not without effort. Abby didn't offer me anything except coffee, which was just fine under the circumstances. I really screwed up. I don't even know who to apologize to first. Looks like you weren't the only one who slept with Catherine that weekend. You just happened to draw the short straw. Damn it, I don't even remember sleeping with her. It was all based on her word. I had no alibi, and no way to prove I didn't. Like an idiot, I took the easy way out. Hell, I must be the biggest sucker in the world. There was no response from the other end of the table. Finally, she spoke. Hey, don't look at me. I completely agree with your self-assessment. I don't know what to do. I thought the divorce was already in motion. It is, but I feel like I should be doing something more. I think right now you should take a shower and shave. I was in pretty rough shape and felt like crap. Can you give me a ride home? The next few days, Rob was in high spirits. The girls seemed satisfied with the genetic test results, but couldn't reconcile things with their mother. My mom and dad supported me as much as they could without prying into matters they shouldn't. That was deeply appreciated. Rob decided it was time to take action. Dad, I want to know. Know what? She has to know, Dad. Mom needs to know who my real father is. It was in the dorm, right? That means Mom got pregnant by one of your brothers, and you took the blame. Is there any way to make her give you their names? Wow. You're assuming there was more than one. Sounds like you don't think very highly of your mother. Not after what she did to you back then, and what she's doing now. She was a mess then, and she's still a mess now. How the hell were you with her all those years? I ignored the last question. I have an idea. I'm not sure if it'll work, but it's worth a try. That same day, I called my loving wife. I tried to mentally structure what I wanted to say, but worried that I'd lose my composure and mess it up. John, how can I help you? I wasn't expecting a call. Judging by the tone of her voice, I feared she might see this as an attempt at reconciliation. I'd have to tread carefully to avoid giving her the wrong idea. I've been thinking about our last conversation. You mentioned wanting to move in with your sister. Is that still something you want? Yes. Have you figured out a way to help me? I'd really appreciate it. I can give you $2,000 to help, but I'll need a couple of things in return. All right. That would really help. What do you need? I'm guessing you don't know I had DNA tests done for all the kids. Oh, crap. Her muffled gasp revealed she had no idea about the tests. I'm so sorry, John. I was hoping this would never come to light. It seemed like things were so good between you and Rob. I found it interesting that she mentioned Rob but not Darcy or Donna. What about the girls? I don't understand. What about them, John? Didn't the DNA tests for the girls bother you? No. Why would they? Her response seemed sincere, and I decided not to press the matter further. I'd like to know the name or names of Rob's father. Tell me, and you'll get the $2,000. The pause on the other end of the line was much longer than I'd expected. Catherine, whoever this guy is, he didn't think highly enough of you to make you an honest woman. Why do you feel the need to protect him? He used you and dumped the consequences on me. I'm the one who deserves consideration, not him. Fine. All right. There were 3 of them. I don't know which one is the father. Names: Kyle Simmons, Ray Thorenson, and Philip Berger. I knew all of them. 3 spoiled rich kids who thought they could get away with anything. They were all fraternity brothers, but loyalty clearly wasn't their strong suit. Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate it. What else do you need, John? If you're not going to stay in the house and you can't sell it, can I take it? Oh God, yes. I can't sell it. And more than anything, I'd love to hand it over to you. Even if I find a buyer, I wouldn't make enough from the sale to cover the real estate commission. You can have it as soon as I move out. I'll sign all the paperwork. John, I have a small request, too. What is it, Catherine? Can you arrange for me to see the kids? Nothing major, but I'm still their mother, and I'd really like to see them sometimes. I'm sure I can work something out. 2 days later, Catherine received her $2,000, and I got the title and mortgage to the house. Rob learned from me about the potential donors. The DNA information was a bit complicated to obtain, but not impossible. Ray Thorenson was a middle school teacher in Altoona. All public employees are required to have their DNA on file. These files aren't accessible to the general public, but Rob had no trouble figuring out how to get what he needed. Ray Thorenson was not Rob's father. Philip Berger was a guest of the Ohio State Penitentiary System. It seemed Phil had a fondness for young girls, girls the state believed shouldn't be sleeping with men old enough to be their fathers. It wasn't my place to judge, but I was glad Philip's location was well documented. Naturally, all of Philip's data was in a database. I don't know how Rob accessed it, but ultimately, it turned out that Phil wasn't Rob's father either. If Catherine had been honest with me, it meant Kyle Simmons had to be the one. The search continued. Seymour Schlamp and I went to high school together. While I was starting at the University of Pennsylvania, Seymour was at Dickerson, earning his law degree. Seymour and the law were not a match made in heaven. He wasn't exactly the straightest arrow in the quiver. In fact, he was, to put it mildly, a bit shady. But for our project, he was the perfect candidate. Using the Nittany Lions alumni news and fraternity web pages, we tracked down Lieutenant Colonel Simmons at Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. Kyle had been a big shot in ROTC during college, and it turned out he had turned that into a career. Abby had a cousin in the Pennsylvania National Guard who managed to obtain Kyle's DNA record. It confirmed everything. By the end of the week, Catherine was out of the house. Instead of continuing the mortgage payments, I simply refinanced the whole deal, removing Catherine's name from all the documents. I moved back into the house, but the kids wanted to stay in Freckville until the end of the school year. Rob wanted to stay close to Shannon. I think I wanted to stay close to Abby, but there were still questions that needed answers. I was surprised by how poorly Catherine's lawyer handled the case. It would have been very easy for him to find out that I hadn't quit my job but had simply taken a leave of absence. Apparently, he never bothered to check. I got the impression he had just filled out a generic divorce form he downloaded from the internet. There were still a few months left before the final decision, but I wasn't expecting any issues. The worst part about going back to work was that it would disqualify Rob from receiving grants. The good part was that I'd be able to pay for his tuition or secure a loan. Abby worked in an office that handled payments for physicians. It was a 9-to-5 job, 5 days a week. I started spending all my weekends in Freckville. Rob and Shannon got along great, with one small drawback. Shannon spent a lot of time with Darcy and Donna. Most of it was shopping, but Rob wasn't thrilled about sharing her time. Abby and I found it amusing, in a good way. For some reason, Abby and I acted more like friends than former lovers. It seemed neither of us was ready to make the first move toward intimacy. Seymour flooded the legal system with every document he could think of. He worked on a shotgun approach, figuring that if he filed enough cases against Simmons, 1 or 2 might stick. He was also hoping to get at least one partial admission of guilt to extract some money from Kyle. I hadn't paid Seymour a cent, but he didn't seem to mind. I didn't want anything from the lawsuits, but it would have been nice if we could pay for Rob's college tuition. It would also make things easier when the girls started school. Things between Rob and me stayed the same. The DNA situation didn't seem to bother either of us. Rob was just happy he wasn't Shannon's brother. I was glad to be her father, though I regretted not being around while she was growing up. She seemed content with everything. Everything started to return to normal. I had sorted out the house situation but didn't want to live alone. Rob and Shannon had finished school and were both working. In 2 months, Rob would be leaving for a state college, while Shannon was set to begin a 2-year program in medical administration at Reading Area Community College. Catherine called from Baltimore. Her relationship with her parents wasn't going well. She was living with her sister and couldn't afford a place of her own. She was having trouble finding work due to poor references from her last employer. She expressed regret for everything and wished she could turn back time. She hoped I could forgive her. While forgiveness wasn't on the table for me, she was glad to hear that the girls were planning a trip to Baltimore to visit her. The conversation ended on a positive note. By the end of the summer, my life was starting to come together. The divorce was finalized with no conditions. Kyle Simmons acknowledged paternity of Rob on the advice of his lawyer. Instead of a monetary settlement, it was agreed that Kyle would cover all of Rob's college expenses for 4 years. Kyle also paid Seymour's legal fees. To make matters worse for Kyle, his wife filed for divorce, which included her claim to 49% of Kyle's upcoming pension. Using simple math, she figured out that Rob had been conceived just 4 weeks before their wedding. Combined with a few other indiscretions over the years, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. The biggest surprise came from Abby. It was too late for dinner, but it was perfect timing for a bottle of wine. She didn't say a word until we were comfortably settled. "John, I need a favor." I liked how she started the conversation because I felt indebted to her and wanted to do something for her. In a few weeks, Shannon will start classes at RACC, and I'm not thrilled about her commuting, especially in winter through the mountains. I wanted to ask if it would be okay for her to stay here with you. Of course. The girls are coming back, and I think they'll all get along just fine. There's one more issue. We've never been apart before, and I'm hesitant to leave her on her own. She won't be alone. I'll be here, and so will the girls. From the look on her face, I realized I'd said something wrong. "I'm so sorry, Abby. That was probably the wrong answer. I can see you were expecting something else. Please, explain." "I swear, John Ritchell, you're the densest man I've ever known. I'm not letting you off the hook again. I'll sit right here until you figure it out. Now, pour me some more wine." Well, it took me a full 5 seconds to realize what was happening. By the time I finished pouring her wine, I was grinning from ear to ear. Well, everything turned out as it should. Rob is doing well at the University of Pennsylvania and comes home whenever he gets the chance. Shannon has excellent grades at RACC and will graduate 6 months early. Donna was accepted into James Madison University in Virginia with a good scholarship. Darcy hasn't decided on a college yet. Abby, now Mrs. Ritchell, has a solid small medical practice serving 3 counties. She hopes Shannon will be ready to step in and help out when the baby arrives. As the famous English writer says, life goes on. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.